Okay, so the question is, why do people pursue rewards that don't produce this resonance? They don't have a value hierarchy. So Pleasure Island, it's a good example. Those kids that were brought there were lost. So they didn't have anywhere to go, they didn't have an identity. So they default to local pleasure. And that's better than none. Although the problem with local pleasure, well, as the narrative made clear, is that you better look out if you're impulsive, because it's going to kick back on you hard. And the reason is, you're only considering the immediate time frame. And the problem is that things propagate across all the time frames. And so just because something works really well this second, cocaine for example, doesn't mean that it's a tenable solution to the class of all problems. So usually, often, people pursue local pleasure because that's the best they can imagine, it's the best they've been taught, they don't see another alternative. So it can be ignorance, it can be they don't want to adopt the responsibility, because part of the problem with working at every level of the hierarchy simultaneously is that it's like dancing to a very complex waltz, let's say. You have to be paying attention to a very large number of things simultaneously and doing things right. It requires responsibility. And so, you know, it's a pain, it's a weight. Part of the reason people drink alcohol is to get rid of their responsibility. I mean, that's, you know, you hear people drink because they have problems. It's like, yeah, no. Some people drink because they're anxious, and alcoholics drink because they're in withdrawal. But young people drink because they're sick and tired of being responsible, because it's annoying. It's like, so I'll drink enough, I won't care about the medium to long-term consequences, because alcohol, that's exactly what alcohol does. It doesn't make you ignorant of the medium to long-term consequences, but it makes you not care about them. And partly it's because it dampens anxiety. So it dampens anxiety, it leaves your positive emotion circuits intact, so then you can go out there and do stupid fun things, and that's a party, really. Let's go do stupid fun things. That's a party. But the medium to long-term consequences are, it's risky. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it's risky. So, yeah, they don't know better. That's the answer, I would say. So, we were interested in what factors made alcoholism hereditary, because it does seem to have a strong hereditary component. And what we basically concluded after doing a tremendous amount of research was that people who are prone to alcoholism, at least one type of person who's prone to one type of alcoholism, got a very, very powerful stimulant effect from the alcohol during the time that their blood alcohol level was ascending in the 10 or 15 minutes after they took a drink, especially if they took a large drink fast, or multiple large drinks fast. You can probably tell, by the way, if you're one of these people, if you want to go do this in the bar the next time you go on an empty stomach, take your pulse, write it down, drink 3 or 4 shots fast, wait 10 minutes, take your pulse again. If it's gone up 10 or 15 beats a minute, look out, because that means alcohol is working as a psychomotor stimulant for you. And we found that for many of these people that was an opiate effect. What seemed to happen was that when they drank alcohol fast, they produced probably beta endorphin, although we were never sure. It can be blocked with naltrexone, which is an opiate antagonist. Anyways, the other characteristic of that pattern of alcohol consumption is that the real kick only occurs when you're on the ascending limb of the blood alcohol curve. So, you know, first of all, your blood alcohol goes up, and then it goes down. And generally, when it goes down, it's not pleasant. That's when you start to feel hungover. And a hangover is actually alcohol withdrawal, by the way. So it's like heroin withdrawal, except it's alcohol withdrawal. And it's generally not pleasant for people, so they usually sleep through it, or it puts them to sleep. But if you're one of these people who get a real kick on the ascending limb of the blood alcohol curve, then you can just keep pounding back the alcohol, and it'll keep hitting you and keep you in that position where you're, you know, on the ascending part of the blood alcohol curve. And you can probably tell if you're one of these people if you can't stop once you get started. You know, so if it's like you have 4 drinks quick, and it's like, man, you're gone until the alcohol runs out, or till it's 4 in the morning, or till you've spent all your money, or you've been at the last bar in town, or that you're sitting on your friend's bed after everybody's gone home from the party and you're still drinking, you might suspect that you're one of those people. And if you are one of those people, well then you should watch the hell out, because alcohol is a vicious drug, and it gets people in its grasp hard, and it's hard for them to escape once they do. People also drink to quell anxiety. So now the problem, because we were looking at the genetics of alcoholism, it wasn't easy to study offspring of alcoholic mothers. And the reason for that is they might have consumed alcohol during pregnancy. In which case, and that's a bad idea, especially there's certain key times in pregnancy where even a few drinks are not good. And that turns out, if I remember correctly, that turns out to be the times when the fetus is producing the bulk of its hippocampal tissue. And so, anyway, so if it turned out that daughters or sons of female alcoholics were markedly different from the general population in some manner, we wouldn't be able to tell if that was a consequence of alcohol consumption during pregnancy or if it was a genetic reflection. So what we wanted to do was study sons of male alcoholics, and so their mothers actually couldn't be alcoholic. And we wanted their fathers, the best subjects had an alcoholic father and an alcoholic grandfather, and at least one or more alcoholic first or second degree male relatives. And they couldn't be alcoholic, and they had to be young. So because obviously if they were 40 and they still weren't alcoholic, then they probably weren't going to be alcoholic. So we wanted to catch them, you know, between, say, well, it had to be 18, which was in Quebec. That was even a little late, probably, but, you know, that's the best we could do from an ethical perspective. So we used to bring these guys into the lab and get them quite drunk. The National Institute of Alcoholism and Alcohol Abuse pretty much put a stop to that research, because we used to bring them in and, you know, we'd get their blood alcohol level up to 0.12 or 0.10. It had to be pretty high. It actually looked like the real physiological effects seemed to kick in when people hit legal intoxication. So you don't really get the opiate effect till you pop yourself up about 0.08, which was the legal limit for driving at that point. So we used to get, some of these guys were pretty big. They'd come in, they were maybe 230-pound guys, and to get them up to, you know, 0.1 or 0.2, you had, or 0.12, you had to give them quite a whack of alcohol. And then what we usually do is we let them sober up till 0.06, about that, and then we'd send them home in a cab. Well, when the NIAAA got all ethical on the whole situation, they wouldn't let us send them home until they hit 0.02. It was like, well, if you're 240 pounds and we've just nailed you with enough alcohol so that your blood alcohol level hit 0.12, you're going to be sitting in our bloody lab bored to death, feeling horrible for like 6 hours or 7 hours. And you'd be pretty damn irritated about it. It's like, it wasn't obvious how we were supposed to keep the people there. It's like, what, can I leave? No. I'm not paying you if you leave. It's like, that's going to produce real positive outcomes with like drunk people in the lab. That's going to work really well. Of course, then they'd never come back either because it was such a bloody awful experience. So I stopped doing that research partly because it became impossible. Anyways, we did find out a lot. We found out that there was this one particular pattern of alcohol abuse that seemed to be hereditary.
Any tips on avoiding booze? Yeah, that's a real tough one. Well, I would say a couple of things. There is a drug, if you're a binge drinker, there is a drug called naltrexone that you could consider, and you take naltrexone every day. It doesn't really have any psychological effect on you, but if you're a naltrexone responder, what will happen is that it will dampen your positive response to alcohol. So some people who are alcoholic, many of them have a very pronounced an opiate effect from alcohol. It looks like it's mediated by beta endorphin, and naltrexone is an opiate blocker. And so what naltrexone seems to do is dampen the positive response. And the positive response, which would be opiate and then dopaminergic, is the same response that makes you want to keep drinking when you start drinking. So if you're one of those people that has a drink and then has to have another one and then has to have another one, and you know soon all your money's gone, then the probability that you have an opiate response is pretty high. And naltrexone can help with that. Generally, when people take naltrexone, they keep drinking. They try to control it, but they keep drinking, and they learn over time that the alcohol doesn't have the same punch. It's still pleasant, but doesn't have the same overwhelming punch that it did at one point. So that would be one suggestion, and it's worth trying. The other is, like, make a plan. I would say do the future authoring program, because it isn't that you're trying to avoid booze exactly. it's that you're trying to restructure your whole life, because if you're a drinker, then all your friends are drinkers, and you're used to drinking in every social situation, and the places that you go to socialize are places that you drink, and like it's really built in as a whole set of habits. And so what you have to do is kind of redesign your life, and you have to think of things. You can't just stop drinking. You have to figure out what you're going to start doing instead of drinking. There's a hole that you have to fill. And the future authoring program will also help you figure out what your life could look like in the absence of alcohol, and what kind of hell you could end up in if you keep drinking and it causes all the problems that it can cause. And I think you really need to, you need to think through the hell that can occur, and you have to think through how your life could be valuable without alcohol, so that you can be motivated enough to try to regulate it. And I would also say, if you fail and slip, don't berate yourself and beat yourself up. Just start quitting again, because if you could cut your alcohol intake down 75%, that's a hell of a lot better than zero. And often people go all or nothing, just like they do when they're quitting cigarettes, and they'll quit for a month and then have a cigarette, and they'll say, oh my God, now I've broken the pact, and then they'll smoke a whole pack and they'll be smoking again. You don't have to do that. You can just decide that you slipped and that you're going to get back on the wagon again. And it can take a long time, but I do believe that you need a better vision of life, right? You have to find something to do that's better than alcohol. And that might take some real consideration, especially if alcohol is a very potent drug for you. And I would also say, don't hesitate to try the naltrexone. It's got a pretty decent clinical history, and it's basically harmless. So